Just want to say something. I am a little bit older than I'm 54 now, and the age thing is important. I wrote my first privacy work before the computers were part of my reality, and people seem to narrow down privacy to this digital thing. And for me, that isn't self-evident. And I always looked for meaningful, uh, for a way of looking at things through the lens of privacy outside the digital. That has always been a personal driver. So, and by the way, the conference we're having here is called Computer Privacy and Data Protection. And that's not because the acronym is better, but it has a reason. We always positioned the two intuitively next to one another, feeling that the one is not the other, and they might be connected, and they're not. So, and to expand on this, why am I insisting on this? Because I think privacy is a value that has an impact way beyond only the digital, and it's about having a certain control, but also being able to express oneself in a certain way. And so I don't want to bring it all back to intimacy, but it's about giving color, a colorful and meaningful expression to your own, to yourself, and developing your personality in a broad manner. So for me, a tattoo is privacy. It is perhaps expression, and it is expressing something definitely, but making a world possible with beautiful and ugly tattoos, ugly ones too, has to do with privacy, has to do with a context where these kind of expressions are possible. And for me, by the way, religion is just another feature of privacy. And I never understood the difference. I never understood really why we needed a right to protection of religious expressions if we have privacy. But that must be ancient wisdom that has then been encapsulated in constitutional law. But in many ways, I believe that privacy is a very fundamental value, explaining a lot of things we're doing in this society. And I always liked it, and I'm actually good in it. So it must be one value that speaks to me. As a father at home, respecting privacy comes very easily. I just understand that quite well. I don't have had any complaints, huh? But it's about even, and one of the ambitions that I set out in my fatherhood was not leaving an imprint too deep in my children's personalities. Now that is a difficult one, because if you don't, it's difficult to do that. And I probably failed brilliantly, but I tried it. So at the at the risk of being absent or distant or whatever, or not present, not interested. But for me that was an ambition, clear ambition to be careful with these things and not to take advantage of the proximity that a family context creates. So even their privacy for me was a value that I could apply, that I could play with, that I could take seriously. And I wasn't interested in my early days in the computers and in all that other stuff. And I still think it's something else. Data protection for me is a way of annoying private companies and public authorities. It is a set of rules, it's a kind of logic of care and prudence. And I like it. It's like my citizen duty to insist on data protection and to harass just about everybody who doesn't have the money or time to investigate data protection and its growing set of duties. So data protection is cool. I love it. It's a good job. But privacy is something that for me always had another function. It is structuring more than just public life, it's structuring my life as a person, and so on. So it is a conference on computer privacy and data protection. And so the ambition has always been to be very broad. Most of the panels we're doing, most of what we're doing touches mainly, is mainly approached through the lens of data protection. But we always try to look at things in a broader way, including other human rights and including privacy. So we just had a panel on Islamic law and data protection, but actually it should have been Islamic law, privacy and data protection. So we always sympathized with express individuals that in the romantic tradition of John Stuart Mill and that break through the conventions, be it in clothing, expressing themselves and so on. So we had also panels on gender, LTBG, whatever is the acronym. We had them all, and that were more privacy than data protection issues. And we tried to bring those issues. We had a lot of panels on sexual violence, and now we have panels on gender. And for me, I hope that you all understand. Anyhow, that has to do with this double focus point that CPDP has. Although a lot of it is digitalized. So one can say that digitalization of social life would bring the two together, but I still think they both have their proper rhythm. So I walk through life with an interest in things that affect my privacy and other people's privacy and are not necessarily related to computers. And I was walking with my wife in Amsterdam, and I saw this, yeah. And I went inside. It was a small art gallery, and I asked, "What's happening here?" And it was about veiling oneself and so on, masking oneself and so on. That was, and I looked and I liked, and I asked for a brochure, and I went home, and I guess I saw Irina, and I said, "That's what I want next year. That's what we should do," because it's a way of playing with. Well, it was in a playful way, allowing a broad reflection about privacy and digitally related issues such as surveillance, but mainly about choice, expression, and these things that I sympathize with. And the rest is history, because, and has been told before, Irina and Rosamunde took it very seriously. That's why I like them that much. They investigated the matter, and they came back with contacts, and Bogomir was the person responsible for that. He was Vienna-based, and we learned that the Amsterdam exposition was actually a very small version of a Vienna exposition, and we have done everything to get Bogomir over, and many of the artists. And the rest is, look how beautiful it is. Huh? But look also what happened. This has nothing to do with computers, although implicitly the digitalization and the surveillance that is made possible by digitalization, but also by the human gaze, is indirectly present. And in later collaborations with our friend, the digitalization became the predominant theme, but always, and I always in a very intelligent way. So the last collaboration over there is about what is surveillance architecture. So again, nothing to do with computers, but it approaches the theme in a broader perspective, and I really like that too. And last year we staged a photo conference in Beaux-Arts that was not organized by us, not curated by Bogomir, but it was about totalitarian states and surveillance over there. And the pictures were beautiful, and they were beautiful. The narrative was very strong. It wasn't really a question of digitalization in these countries. It was a question of totalitarianism, that was giving form throughout decades of that rule, and that's when I feel comfortable with these things. I always liked privacy a lot, and I always liked this is another part of my brains that is more affected by privacy-related thoughts and than by these data protection things that I can play with those and I'm good. But the other ones affect me more as an individual, and that individual, of course, is craving for food, and I think that what Irina has done in the past years was important for us. It's always it has been there. It has been there in a diplomatic way because people coming to CPDP are coming for ideas in the market of ideas and the discussions over there. But it has been the possibility to access this was always there, and so I'm double happy, and I want to honor Irina in this too. This year we're integrating the artistic activities set up by Bogomir and Irina into CPDP, and it's actually a reward and to give back something to CPDP made possible by CPDP, because it's part of the we integrate that in our total work plan and the work budget and so on, and we're very happy to have it that way. So that was my small introduction, and as I understood, Bogomir will take over, and I'm very happy.
Thank you. Well, what you mentioned, and what I think it's very important that you're talking actually about feeling, and I think what these images do to you, Paul, but also to audience, is that they make you feel the topic of privacy or data protection. So I'm very happy that we actually managed after all these years to move into the, let's say, main program, even that the room is still small, but I think half empty, but I think this will change. What I will try to explain and present today is the approach of sort of interdisciplinary approach coming from art mainly, and study of images that are trying to communicate something about the topic of privacy and data protection. We will look into the artworks that are produced after 9/11 up to today, so you will be able to see how these works are morphing and transforming. And of course, what I'm trying to underline is that sometimes if we look into the art production or even amateur production of images, we can actually predict what is coming or what will be the topic of conferences like this. So, Faceless, or Reinventing Privacy Through Subversive Media Strategies, is the title of the book that was just published in June with the support of University of Applied Arts Vienna. It took almost 5 years to get this publication, and so Faceless explores the phenomenon of inescapable recognizability in the media and the resulting strategies of media users to become virtually faceless, a phenomenon that has become increasingly common in artistic practice after 9/11 and in socio-political consequences. Actually, there's no sound coming now, but yeah, I would like to just show you the trailer of the exhibition, just that you get an idea of the feeling of the images, of materials, of approaches, and I would then like to sort of remind what is the role of the masks, and to somehow state that our unstable identity yearns for return to the mask, like in past times. We are attracted to wearing masks as a form of protection, camouflage as a prop, or just for entertainment. So these words in bold and italic are the words that you will somehow see or will be demonstrated to Warrior's artworks. And when the exhibition happened in 2013, I was able to select 100 artists, fashion designers and designers, who all have in common that they work with images with no face. So this is a massive production, and of course we're talking about a time of internet, which of course speeds up the production, but if you think this is actually a movement, it's a kind of a collective protest. It's an agreement that there is a reason, there is an idea that the portrait is not a portrait that shows our face, but it's a portrait that is defaced. So in 2013, with the support of Elisabeth Hayek and Museumsquartier Vienna, who invited me, and Brigitte Felderer from Social Design, I had a chance to gather all these artworks and bring them to one place. And having them physically present in space helped me also to actually sort of archive them and organize them in groups and to understand for what reason they're produced and in what occasions they're produced. Some of them are aesthetically simply seductive. Some of them have a really long-run research behind. But they're all together telling us that we live in a kind of faceless times. And as somebody who did a master in film and who was pretty much influenced by cinema, for me the narrative or storytelling behind this was very important. So I would like to show you a work from Brochel that was actually, I first time saw it live now in Vienna at Kunsthistorische Museum. And it was the very last work, so the drawing at the very end of the exhibition. And I always had something, I was always fascinated with Bruegel because he deals with crowds, he looks from distance, then he zooms in. And what's here fascinating is actually he depicts the beekeepers without faces. And for that time, this was a really strong statement. This was a statement against, or not even against, more as a sign of the restlessness that people are in, which is of course connected to the religion, to a certain uncertainty. And he actually destroyed a very big amount of drawings because having this kind of art was quite problematic because faces should be depicted. I mean, it's very clear when you tell somebody you're faceless, it's an insult, or not seeing a face or not having a face is also sort of a self-reflective process. It has also, of course, philosophical background. Another work from the past that I would like to show you, it's from 1970s, made by Jurgen Clouseau, so German artist who works a lot with let's say a kind of a use of fashion or garments or textile in order to try another self, so simply by somehow masking and transforming. He was very much fascinated by portraits of terrorists in media after attack in Munich. And by working in studio with these images, he realized that they're extremely seductive and addictive. And he sort of felt that very soon there will become a tendency that might repeat itself and grow. So original work was consisting only of 8 portraits. In 2000, when he exhibited this in Munich, it was actually consisting of 96 pieces. So in a way, he really was right. Terrorism will become a tendency. And what's interesting about this image is it doesn't really matter for what cause or for what reason these people are carrying this mask. When you see them together, they're one thing, they're terrorists. So they're becoming one group, which is in a sense a very primitive form of masking, which sort of by putting the mask on a face, you gain the power of the crowd. You gain the power of the idea of the ideology. In the same way as later I will show Pussy Riots or Anonymous or Zapatista or any public protests that is taking place today is also happening under masks. So in what kind of atmosphere Faceless was created or started, or in this kind of grotesque form? So once upon a time in New York, Twin Towers were always a sort of symbol of New York. On every postcard, this was a sign of entering New York next to the Statue of Liberty. And then what happened? Everybody knows. This image sort of was broadcasted. It was going live on our television. I remember it very well as a kid. And even though I was in Serbia, where somehow this event was very much far away, I still actually felt this. And somebody who comes from Serbia, which is not an EU country, it definitely did affect the way how even EU started positioning and changing later to us, and etc. So it was a kind of a sign of a collective agreement that something needs another kind of control. And speaking of Brohil again, I find this painting very interesting in connection to 9/11 because actually painting is called Icarus Fall, but it's very hard to find the Icarus. So this sort of big tragedy of Icarus is hardly visible. It's in the very corner between the boat and the land, those two legs sticking out. So it's a very interesting way how actually such a big tragedy is depicted in a daily routine of an ordinary people in the same way as 9/11 happened. For some of us, it's something very far away. To some of us, it's totally irrelevant. But it brought a certain fear, and it brought a different kind of media images to us. So even if you think of public executions with a faceless mask, this kind of images became a daily routine almost. So for this reason, or for fear, from the fear, or that we might lose a comfort that we have in Western Europe or in Western world, somehow surveillance exploded all over the place and being attaching to public space. And for many artists, of course, it became a source of inspiration. So for example, this object sculpture from Adi Wageknecht, the Stefan Heckenberger from 2013, is made out of fake surveillance cameras that are blinking. But what is interesting is that when you watch people passing by, they immediately change their posture, their body, they put a smile, they take phones out, and they pretend that they're fascinated by the object. So somehow they self-surveil themselves. Even the object does not really work. It works as a monument to the surveillance. Manu Luksh, who is actually also somewhere here, she will be presenting tomorrow, in 2007 did a project that is also titled Faceless, and she decided to write Manifesto for Cctv filmmakers. So basically, she looked into the law and realized that if she's recorded in a public space, she can demand those tapes in which she is recorded, and by law, these should be delivered to her. But every other person needs to be deleted manually. So we're talking about different technology. So what I thought is really interesting is how artists sort of try to maneuver in these spaces and try to look how this ground could be fruitful or used in a creative or critical way. Another artist that I would like to present you, and actually for this we do need a sound, so just to check if in the back, let's see if it's working. No, I think it's not working, yeah. So this is a work from American artist Jill Majid, and let's try again. I'll go back. It was working before, but okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I will just introduce you shortly. So basically, Jill Majid is Papa. So she's here, and she's being guided through the public space by an observer through surveillance cameras. She's trying.
Hi, Jill.
Oh yeah, here we go. Thank you.
Where are you? Go on. That may be very difficult, but we'll try it. Well, I'm quite away from you. I'll just zoom in on you. You can't see the wire. Yeah.
So she has closed
I am.
eyes. and she's being guided by a stranger
Right.
through the
Okay.
telephone.
Do what you want to do. Are your eyes closed? Yes, at the moment. There's several people approaching you. There's quite a lot of people actually. Just be careful. There's a little old lady in front of you. To your right. To your right. No, you carry straight on. You're going to your left, Jill. You're veering off. Stop, Jill. Right. Turn right a little bit. Right. That's better now. Now you're back on course again, and walk straight ahead. Now, stop again. Stop. You're veering left all the time. You're done. Try it again. Yeah. You're getting a few strange looks, but...
So you could say this is a collaboration between the stranger who is watching us and Jill in this red coat, almost creating this suspense of can she be given to the stranger's gaze, and can she trust this person to be taken through the public space? Is she safe? So it's examining this sort of idea of the surveillance as something that is there for us to protect us and that we can trust. And based on these collaborations, so Jill was very welcomed by Cctv in Liverpool. They really liked her. She became a legend, and this provided her possibility to apply for an open call in Netherlands, where Dutch Secret Service was interested to commission an artwork that would give them a human face. This was the assignment. So basically Jill applied as somebody who had a position at the Rijksacademy. So, you know, she ticked all the boxes. She's somebody to be trusted, and she already worked on similar projects. So she, for 3 years, was working at the Dutch Secret Service, and she produced a work called The Spy Project. She was not allowed to really use any kind of technology except notes. So she was basically meeting spies on different locations and then writing and describing these moments. So she met 18 of them, and during her exhibition, the work has been confiscated and re-edited. So what you see here is actually a request what should be taken out of these stories, and there was also a very clear idea how contemporary artwork can be exhibited in a glass box, and still knowing that there are notes of this kind will be enough for audience to project and imagine what kind of stories are written inside. And finally, when she presented the project at Tate, it was totally confiscated. So she found out that she was labeled as somebody who can burn the face, which is a term that is used when the identity of a spy is in danger. So basically, she created this burning, strong neon saying, I can burn your face, and exhibited with these fragmented, re-edited stories. In a way, what's really interesting is that I think that she kind of gave the face to the Secret Service, because this sort of abstract possibility that anybody of us could be a spy is exactly what somehow Secret Service needs to remind us. So this part of this project was something that I was calling Invisible People. So it belonged to the block in exhibition Invisible People, which tries to show those people that we don't see but are managing our living, and also those that we actually will never see because they're not relevant enough. So I would like to show you the work from Andrew Norman Wilson called Google Workers Living Googleplex, and then I will say something a little bit more about it.
Andrew Norman Wilson's viral video piece, Workers Leaving the Googleplex, 2012 to 13, contains footage of 2 Google locations in Mountain View, California, with a voiceover narration spoken by Wilson.
Sometimes elsewhere. My labor was sold to Google in the form of a 9-to-5 job. I had access to a personally unprecedented amount of privileges, but was not entitled to the ski trips, Disneyland adventures, stock options, and holiday cash bonuses from their team of temporary Santa Clauses. Thousands of people with red badges, such as me, my team, and most other contractors, worked amongst thousands of people with white badges as full-time Googlers. Interns are given green badges. However, a fourth class exists at Google that involves strictly data entry labor, or more appropriately, the labor of digitizing. These workers are identifiable by their yellow badges, and they go by the team name ScanOps. They scan books, page by page, for Google Book Search.
The artist's attempts to film and interview the yellow badge workers were stopped quickly by Google security and resulted in the termination of his employment at Google. This project is a photographic series made of Google Books images with visible errors in the scanning process, gleaned from scouring hundreds of books online.
So, of course, the reference of Andrew Norman Wilson was to workers leaving Lumiere's factory. So it's a kind of a famous film, very old, for one of the first ones, where actually you also see this sort of labor exiting the factory, and he of course compares this in his comparative studies. So this was the block about invisible people and surveillance, and of course what was very important that the issue of burqa is something that from the 9/11 moment, and actually especially from my moment of coming to Netherlands, has been very much in the air. Theo van Gogh made the movie Submission, which resulted with his murder. So he was murdered in Amsterdam in 2004. And the atmosphere in Netherlands, especially this murder was seen as an attack of freedom of speech. And since then, the issue of burqa somehow comes and goes. And of course, it was always around, like in some countries, like in Italy in 1975, it was already forbidden. But it's interesting to see what it does to artists and how actually they felt alarmed, and that there's a certain urgency to deal with this topic. Some of them will be supportive to it, some will be critical. So for example, Nezakete Kitsi created this video, Gravity, where she, under the layers of scarves, sort of disappears. Shara Mentekabi does censorship of sex postcards from UK in the same way that was done in Iran after the revolution, where the depiction of women without chador was not possible. So basically there was a person by hand censoring any kind of drawing that existed where women would be visible. What he does this on images from magazines, fashion magazines, that kind of challenges also what is the way that we depict women in our society. The burqa even became present in homoerotic artworks, drawings where male nudity would sort of be also the self-portraits of artists would also be like, the faces would be covered with hair. And for me, what's really interesting is how, for example, Japanese brand, fashion brand Undercover decides to enter Paris Fashion Week with something like this, which is actually very much what I just presented before, but just in a different fabric, so therefore it looks apocalyptic. So we are talking here 2006, 2007. Images of Guantanamo Bay, which actually are again faceless, are becoming a source of inspiration again actually in gay magazines, Amnesty International campaign, Banksy. So the balaclava that was announced already as a tendency in the 70s, as a dangerous tendency, as an image that maybe we should not publish, indeed became fashion. So Raf Simons, just a little bit before 9/11, actually had this fashion show. So pop stars started using balaclava. As I said, public protests are faceless. At the same time, showing face, yes, it's an option, but then you optimize yourself or you adjust yourself with a garment that you wear so that you become a group. So in this project, Executives from Ari Verslaus and Ellie Uitenbroek, what is interesting is that faces are visible, but it's very hard to distinguish these people because they try to move and act in the same way. They try to be uniform. They try to not be individuals, but a group. As I mentioned, homoerotic art, fashion, and fetish, there has been an interesting example of actually sort of fetishization of a terrorism, and somehow this fear of it started becoming almost like a sexual sort of obsession or like a drive, but also like there was fascination with not seeing the face, which of course always had a sexual tension. So Margiela collection as well, Kanye West, sexuality. What's interesting is like if you think of images of red light district in like 80s, for example, prostitutes would be very happy to be photographed. They would even give interview. They would spend time with you. In 2008, when this project was happening, there were strict restrictions. So basically, camera is unwanted guest. You can depict the prostitute only through the body posture, and they decided to be faceless, to be behind the hair. Jan Stratman documented in time of financial crisis in 2008, like people trying to escape the gaze by looking through the garden. Ute Klein documents love couples and friends that actually feel more comfortable when their faces are not visible. This image is already pretty much historic because as you see the flashes on it. It comes from, it's a collection of again, gay dating application, Gruyter or maybe Gay Romeo, where guys are basically deleting their face with the use of flash. And in today's time, this would be definitely iPhone or a gadget. So somehow, what here becomes interesting is that the question, who is deciding how this photo will look like? Is this the decision of the people who are on the image, or is the technology demanding or training us how to make the photo? So from faceless to bodiless, mutants. So I will run fast. Of course, and this is the point where it becomes interesting, where digital steps in. So with the use of software and technology, suddenly body becomes just a material that can be manipulated and maneuvered and shaped and deranged. And somehow that also, again, reflects itself into fashion. Artists decide to not be visible on self-portraits. So they're hiding behind different materials. Their self-portraits are falling apart. They're trying with different kind of drugs to reach a different kind of faces. Icons are disappearing. Even David Bowie's cover was faceless. Defacing of politic icon. And here, this is an older work. Well, older, I mean, it's 2005, so it's Arthur Elsener, and it's an interesting old school work where actually his face is manipulated by computer. So his face expression is manipulated by the impulses that the computer is giving to his face to kind of perform the perfect face or sad face, or to actually deconstruct left side of a face to the right side of a face. Digital filters are also becoming now translated into actually physical objects, like this mask is actually real. And then of course the pop culture steps in and uses it in a concert, like Björk is on the right side. And Adam Harvey, who was yesterday here, he spoke about, actually he didn't speak yesterday about it, but when I met him, he was very much interested in counter surveillance. So if there is a demand to be visible and show the face, then there should be something like a gray zone when you decide that you don't want to be visible. So he, with the use of makeup and hair, tried to kind of find a way to trick the algorithm so that the face is not detectable. And this was then printed out in different magazines, in this case in Time magazine. And I was always wondering, okay, who is the audience for this? Will this ever reach somebody? And 2 years ago, there was a rave in Paris where actually kids decided to have a makeup and hairstyle that would totally avoid face detection. So you kind of had to prove that you're not face detectable at the entrance, and then you could enter and party. So it's sort of too interesting to see how something like this somehow in delay does reach also like more general audience and mainstream. And what Adam Harvey brought is actually this idea of a privacy gift shop, so that you can actually buy privacy, but can you afford it? And what would this be? Would this be a design object, like on a left side, that the thermal camera cannot detect your body? Or in case you're paranoid that your phone is not off, maybe this kind of wallet or pocket for your phone would work. I mentioned Anonymous. What is interesting is that there are copyrights on those masks that Anonymous is using. So artist Aram Bartol thought like, okay, if you want this to be a symbol of your revolution or of your revolt, then please do it yourself and don't support the capitalism that you are against. Speaking of LGBTQ and like researchers that are maybe going in the direction of trying to figure out our sexuality, even if they're true or not true, it created an atmosphere for production of works like from Zach Blas, who is actually suggesting that we should all wear a face of mixed group of LGBTQ queer activists so that we are actually not detectable in a public space. Oh yeah, so just a second. So I would like to show you the work from Heather Hagberg, who actually opened Transmediale last year, and that's the work that was mentioned that is connected to Chelsea Manning. But before that, there was an earlier work, and I would like to show you that work. It's actually 3-minute video, so she shows how your biomaterial from public space could be used for reconstruction of your face into a mask, and she's sort of trying to figure out if something like this would be possible. So I will show you the video, the introduction to her project. in the same way, actually Heather was asked to, based on a mouth swab, reconstruct the face of Chelsea Manning in the moment when Chelsea was still transitioning and nobody actually was able to see her. So this resulted with 2 masks, and then the project grew, and in Transmediale was presented in Berlin, which is this kind of a let's say a spectrum of possible faces, and some of them are coming quite close to the look of Chelsea, some totally not. Then I will mention, actually we have to finalize because there should be Q&A as well. So basically this is a work from Jeremy Bailey, who was kind of surprised that you can patent things that don't exist yet. Before it was you have to invent something, but now you can patent imaginary future. So this means that the corporations that have a lot of money can patent any possible invention in the future. So the gestures that we use for activation of technology, like the iPhone that does, etc., this is all patented. And then Jeremy Bailey, as an artist who wants that the freedom and the movement and the gestures still belong to people, was trying to figure out all these silly ways of using and activating technology. So with his colorful nails, then he would create a patent for that, and then to turn himself into kind of public sculpture that fights for the freedom of artists. And what's really interesting is...
So basically, I'm a unicorn now.
This is exactly what we all have in our phones now. So it's really, what I'm trying also here to draw is, and motivate, is really the collaborations between the fields, because actually we might be able somehow to maneuver things sooner and faster. And yes, of course, with an artistic nature, as most of us do have, we're actually applying this almost every day in communication. And yes, the trend of face swapping applications, the trend of try to be old, try to be young, try to be this gender, just sort of created this massive noise where it's all somehow evolving around our face. And the question is, how can such a noise be reduced and how long can it last? So yes, that's a kind of conclusion, and much more in the book that you're free to order if you're interested. And there's also a short film that we are showing in a corner of the exhibition space. So I hope that I managed to draw the atmosphere of facelessness that we are living in. Yeah, thank you.
Hear me? No. Yes? Ah, good, good. So I'm Gloria González Fuster. This is a self-governed panel. There is no moderator, and you are starting to pay the consequences of the lack of moderator, because we have like 15 minutes where I'm supposed to be talking for 20 minutes. So we have a problem. So I will try to reduce my things. So there's some space for you to react, and I would just like briefly comment, try to convey some important messages from my side. I'm very happy to be here with BOB, and I was asked by Irina to discuss Bogomir's work, and I'm very happy that I accepted this invitation, because then Irina told me I will lend you the book to prepare. Then I think there's a problem, because I thought it was a kind of joke, but actually yesterday she told me, you have to bring the book back, and I had to give the book back, and it's a problem for me because I really, really like this book. It's a great book. So my main message for today is, please ask Irina to give me the book back, because I need it. And so that's one message. And the other message that I actually would also like to convey is that, but you already know this, Bogomir is a very interesting person, a very nice person, and you should go to talk with him afterwards and ask your questions if you don't have time now, because he's very nice. So I'm very happy to be here. Why do I like this book? Indeed, it's about privacy, surveillance, data protection, but it's not only about computers, and Paul said this. It is also about computers, but not only. And I think that's a great starting point for us, because we tend to sometimes get hypnotized by computers, data protection, and all these things. So it's about many things. It's about reflecting from the point of the face. and technology, but also beyond technology. And there are many other things. Like the mirror is a technology. We have this idea that how do we know naturally our faces through the mirror, but the mirror is itself a sort of technology that allows us to know our own face. So it really brings many questions in. And yesterday I had a short talk with Bogomir, and he used this word intuition, that many things for him are about intuition, and Paul used this word intuition. And I think that's perhaps why we connected, or you connected, or that it makes sense for us that he is here. So, and because from a scientific perspective, this word of intuition sometimes is a bit delicate, because people have intuitions about grand theories about things, and they become deductive. No? So they have a big intuition, and they try to then explain things. But I think your intuition type is an intuition, an inductive intuition. You have an intuition that this is a path that we can just explore, and then we come up with ideas. So you have this intuition that the face is something worthwhile exploring. Now you have this intuition that the crowd is worth exploring. Because Bogomir explained yesterday beautiful things about the crowd, and I hope if you come back to CPDP, you will talk more about the crowd. And he's been analyzing crowds, and he was analyzing briefly, spontaneously, the crowd at the drink thing, and I was wow, because he analyzes look at how people get in close and they don't get close, and maybe you can explain the dynamics of the drink at CPDP. It's really worthwhile, and I was thinking perhaps we should indeed place a surveillance camera, and you can explain. But of course, it's so delicate again and again to do surveillance of privacy experts. But maybe that could be a good thing. So I'm not a great a professional expert on art issues. Paul is also not an expert on art, but we are happy to welcome you. I'm an amateur collection. I have an amateur collection of songs about surveillance and privacy. So I collect songs that are about surveillance and privacy. And I found 2 relevant songs about the face. So I would like to share this with you. Actually, one is from Susan Vega. So I have a generation thing. And it's... I'm not also a professional reader of poetry, but I will read this. And in a song which is called Private Goes Public, the lyrics are, mask will, because this is about the face and about mask will keep your features in check, because face is the place where the private goes public and steps through the gate. And I thought it was some of the words that you're expressing is about this, how the face is about the private that goes into the public. And there is indeed a tension, but is this really about, can the face be private? Isn't always public? I don't know. There are many interesting things there. Then I've tried to find a more recent song, so more young thing, and it's an artist called Sophie Hunter, and the song is called Face Shopping. And the lyrics say, my face is the front of shop, my face is the real shop front, my shop is the face I front, I'm real when I shop my face. Yes, this is about surveillance capitalism, yes, okay. And it's again about this idea, what is a real face, are we natural, or what is a mask? I think we know all our faces are masks. We are not naturally like we look, we have a different hair, and I will tell you a secret that is really a secret. If you check the CPDP conferences, we have, there are all the faces of people, and I was asked this year again to send a new picture, whatever, and I said, well, I will send a picture with an Instagram filter. And I did. I don't know, you can find this, and then there's a filter, so I look better than I am. But I realized that actually these Instagram filters are, of course, they try to solve the problems that people have in general. They did not solve my problem, which is that my hair is completely wrong. So the filter does not address my hair problem. Yes, if you look at my CPDP thing, so what is a real face, a professional face? What is a real picture of us naturally? I think there are many questions that this book that I need to have back from Irina really helps you think about. So do try to get it, because it's really somehow saturated with information about this question of visibility and the face. I had personally written about these questions of visibility and visibility together with a former colleague and more or less friend still, Rocco Bellanova. We wrote about politics of disappearance. So I think there is something about strategies of disappearance and politics of disappearance, trying to talk about these paradoxes of visibility. So people want to be visible but invisible. What is to be accounted for, what is to be countable, what is to be just disappearing. And then we had this other work on obscenity. Obscenity is also related to disappearance, and this idea that to be obscene. So the obscene is something that cannot be visible because it's too visible, and it links to sexuality. So if it's some things are too direct and too visible, they have to be covered and hidden. So there are many, many interesting discussions that we can have, and you can be inspired with this book. I think basically that's it, except I just wanted to mention something that you probably know about this, but for me it was important to link this discussion to this special work of art. I don't know if you know about this thing that is a sort of classical in critical French literature, which is called L'inconnu de la scène. Do you know about this? Do you know about this? Because I could not find it in the book in the short time that I had the book. L'inconnu de la scène. So it's L'inconnu de la scène. You should Google this because it's very important when you read about ethics. Levinas and all these people, they have this ethics of the face, because it's also something that I could not find in your book. Maybe it's a good thing, but so there's people thinking that ethics can be based in the face. You know? The face is the ultimate sign of ethics, that you can kill somebody if you don't look at the face, but if I look at your face, I will never kill you, because so there's a sort of resistance in the face. No, this is why we deface people before we kill them, or also for sex, these kind of things. Yes. So there is an ethics of the face, and this ethics of the face has been linked to this inconnu de la scène, which actually predates completely the discussion. It's from the end of the 19th century, and so a young girl was drowned in the Seine in Paris. And a guy picked the corpse, and then he said, apparently that's the legend, she's such a beautiful girl, and this beauty will disappear. So at the time what they didn't have biometrics, what they had a sort of mask, they put a clay on corpses as a sort of souvenir thing. So it was an unidentified girl, but she made this mask, and then somebody took a picture of this because she was so beautiful. And then this picture became a sort of popular thing, that it was reproduced, a sort of IKEA poster of the time, that people really had in their places, this picture of this beautiful, anonymous young girl. And I think it's, at some point you mentioned something about eternity, and that's very much, to me, this link about, so this girl became famous, but she was anonymous, and she became famous about in a sort of objectified way. So it's not really a subject, we don't know who she was, just that the beauty is eternal, is some sort of beauty. So I think it's something that you can also try to perhaps put in your next edition or whatever. So basically yes, that's it. I think we can. I hope you do have questions for Bogomir, and I think I really want the book back. Thank you. Who has questions, reactions? Yes, because otherwise I would really like you to explain more about the work that you're doing now. So that you explain this exhibition. The book is about an exhibition that was like a sort of former work, and now you're working on something else.
Yeah, actually, for me, Faceless started in 2004, and by the time of 2007, to whoever I would mention this project, they would think that it's my personal perversion, that I'm obsessed with faces that are under masks. So then it took me 6 years to convince people that I am maybe a pervert, but at the same time I do sense that there's many more perverts that have the same problem as I. So finally the exhibition took place in 2013, and then it took 5 years to get the book. So let's say I'm pretty much sick of Faceless in a way, as like it keeps sort of coming, but I feel that it's my duty to also look into how things are developing. And what's really important is that most of the works that are very often produced and images are produced out of context. And the internet brought this sort of idea that things can just be used without a context. And this is why also images are now creating a lot of confusion, and this is definitely what also gave the birth to the fake media. The tools that are also introduced here pretty much were testing of how fake or how fictional can you be, but that people still actually believe you. And I realized by doing this project that I'm very much interested in how things manifested itself in crowds, so on bodies or in bodies of people. But what really stayed with me from 1999, when the NATO bombing was taking place in Belgrade, was that I was dancing like crazy. And not just me, but like everybody. It was the best dance of my life. So again, another kind of weird pathology that in time of crisis and fear and possible death, you are actually dancing. And I understood it as a protest actually against the Slobodan Milosevic, but also against NATO. So when I moved to Netherlands, I got very much confronted that the dance floors did not have this kind of urgency, and it was pretty much boring and lame, and people would go home at 4 a.m. and there was just, the bodies did not move. Also, there was something that I would call body crisis, that bodies were not dancing. And there are some explanations that the technology that was given to us also disturbed the dance floor, and etc., etc. But I had this idea that by attaching the camera above the dance floor, so from a bird eye view, you could have a kind of microscopic shot or this divine perspective of crowds, and you could sort of wait for the moment where they're going to start moving again or where they're going to start dancing again. And it took, again, a lot of years. So in 2013, I attached the first camera, and in 2014, I could sense that the dance floor is getting a different dynamics. By aiming to do this, actually, I started getting an insight in all kinds of agendas of clubs and possible directions of how you actually curate the crowds, what is the interest in places to curate the crowds. And I really started understanding clubbing as a way of putting a collective body or crowd into kind of formalin and waiting for time of urgency when this crowd could explode and be used into streets or for any kind of political reasons. So just to give some examples, Georgia Bassiani Techno Club in May, for 2 days people danced in front of parliament and it was political. Palestinians together with organizers from Haifa started organizing big raves, and this gave the visibility to Palestinian youth that before we did not see. Ukraine has similar situation, in Brazil as well. So I really started differentiating actually crowds that have an urgency or dancing crowds that are political or have some kind of social political urgency next to those that don't. Finally, the anti-fascist protest in Berlin that took place last year were organized by clubs and party organizers, so not by political party. Yeah, the amount of people who gathered for sake of dance, for sake of politics, was actually quite high. So yes, something that was again this sort of personal experience that I need to research by involving different kind of methodology and technology, or like even people. Yeah, became my PhD. So that's the project that yeah. So I hope that I managed to bridge, but it's somehow it's always about crowds and power. Yeah.
Yes.
I think you can hear me. I don't need a
Yeah.
if I'm recorded. Okay, so my question is that in the golden age or the golden years of Cctv filmmaking, and also in my understanding that was the golden age of surveillance art. I mean, Julia Scher and all others who exposed themselves to all-style, now we can call it all-style surveillance cameras. There was a striking difference between the images, the moving images made by surveillance equipment and the standard equipments of filmmakers. And that's why the strict rules of Cctv film making were declared. But there were really important pieces like the New York group, the surveillance camera players, I think that was their name, who were street artists in a certain way, and they designed the street art, so to say, at that time. But and there were some others, I can't recall the name. The film, classic Cctv film, which was shot in a shopping mall in London, maybe, only through the CCTV cameras. So if the CCTV cameras had zooming possibilities, that they could use it. All the sounds, the music was created from the sound of the cracks of the cameras
Of the
moving.
equipment,
Okay.
yeah.
But later on, the difference between the surveillance equipment and the normal surveilling equipments disappeared. So now your iPhones or all other kinds of cameras, I think we have quite a few here, can produce at least as good images as a professional filmmaker, and also the light, so you can't distinguish it. Is it, or was it, an impact on artists who started as surveillance artists, but now they shifted from surveillance to something else, for example, concentrating on face or something else, not surveillance itself? Did the technological change or the technical development have a role?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who does work with cameras, like, I don't know, 4K, and then I have editing software, and then you think that production-wise, you need to have as smaller team as possible. Actually, it's great if it's 1 or 2 maximum. So you're kind of obliged to experiment with what you have. And what I find really fascinating is, like, and also with the project I Dance Alone, is the possibility how much can you zoom, but also what's really interesting is how organic and natural hand movement you can do in a post-production. So, so this what used to be it's sort of gone, and you can actually have extremely fluid movements and organic movements, but it still feels like, I mean, I can actually maybe show, no, we have to round up. I think what's now going on is that sort of, again, the tools that are given to us, we are like, when you show the crowd of people, let's say if I have now the dance floor, wait, I will just show you fast. So yeah, let's say this is the dance floor, one of the dance floors that we act as surveillance system right away. Like, I'm sure that if most of us would watch this image, we will conclude that 60 or 70% of us watch it in the same way. So for me, what's more interesting is that somehow it seems that that we are almost becoming, consciously or unconsciously, those who are surveilling the material that we're watching, but also those who are surveilling each other. And this is somehow reflected as well in a new productions, where what used to be a technology that is watching now is like we kind of, our choices in the way how we make material or films is sort of, we are surveilling each other. Like, I don't know if I was clean. Like, it seems before that it was somehow separation of, but now it seems that the artists are already with these tools surveilling in a way. I mean, this is also what somehow my project is also doing in a way.
I think that's a great conclusion, great message to conclude.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We
Okay.
have to just liberate the people, and we have to liberate the room. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the artistic talk.